On today's Locked on Bucks, sort of. It's the inaugural one. We teased it for weeks. We told you on yesterday's episode that this is what it was going to be. This is wrestling only, wrestling-specific version of Locked on Bucks. We recap Money in the Bank from yesterday, share our thoughts, what it's shaping up for the rest of the summer. An eventful day. We get into it after this.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked on Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined by Camille Davis, and we thank you for making Locked on Bucks your first listen every day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube as well, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I feel like we've added quite a few caveats and disclaimers with this, Camille, so I'll put it out there once more. We're still doing 5 days a week Bucks shows. This is just when it warrants. Both of us appreciate the sweet science that is professional wrestling. I know there are Bucks fans out there in the community as well, so we figured, why not? Frank and Eric, when Eric Name was the host, they used to do a film every once in a while podcast. So we're doing the same thing here and serving that small slice of the Venn diagram of Bucks fans that also like professional wrestling. So this one is just going to be recapping Money in the Bank that took place last night in Toronto. We both watched it as it happened. And I suppose there's the elephant in the room to get to, a couple of notable things that happened on this show. But going in, I wasn't truly sure what to expect. I think we all assumed Drew McIntyre was going to win the men's briefcase. You all also guessed it's probably going to be the first match of the night to set up, all right, Drew's going to win. And when does he cash in? Is he, in fact, going to same night as he teased? I don't know how you felt, Camille. So spoiler alert, we'll go through the results here. Drew McIntyre wins the men's Money in the Bank briefcase. A couple of insane ladder spots that I had not seen before. Chad Gable was really the star of that match, but Drew McIntyre heaving a ladder at Jey Uso to climb it and win. He wins the Money in the Bank briefcase. He had said on Raw earlier in the week he was going to cash in that night. So we all just kind of waited to see, okay, is he actually going to cash in the Money in the Bank match? He did. So all the other match results we can get to, I think, not to take too much time away from it, the biggest surprise for me, we'll get quite a bit to the Drew and that fallout. To me, the biggest surprise was Braun Breaker not beating Sami Zayn for the Intercontinental Championship.
So let me start by saying that personally, I knew CM Punk was going to pop up at some point. I thought it was going to be during the ladder match and preventing Drew from even getting the briefcase to start with. So when he actually won it, I was like, CM Punk didn't come out. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that. But then when he came out later, when, as you mentioned, Drew McIntyre came in, cashed in, made a triple threat match for the championship, and then CM Punk came out, I was like, there it is. There it goes. But I was the only person, because on Tech File, ahead of pay-per-views, we do a match prediction. So we put it on the record, trying to get a good record. And I was the only one who had Sami Zayn winning. I didn't think he would win clean. That was the surprise. I thought it was going to be because there's been interference like Dragunov, and there's just been a lot of different people kind of messing around with that belt. So I was like, I think Sami retains, but it's not a clean win. So when Sami won clean, I was like, that's a big victory for Sami Zayn. I did not see it happening that way, although I saw it happening. So that was a pleasant surprise. But, I was hoping that LA Knight would get that briefcase. Like I was hoping he got it last year. It just feels like last year it was like peak LA Knight mania for the WWE. He still had a huge pop at Money in the Bank this past weekend, which I was like, he still got it. And I was like, man, I just want to see LA Knight doing something. But I guess Logan Paul is going to be the next thing for him.
Yeah, last summer seemed to be the peak. I was at SummerSlam, and it seemed like that was the zenith of LA Knight being over. We'll get into all the storylines to come from the results, but just really quickly, the results we mentioned: Drew McIntyre wins the men's Money in the Bank match. Drew McIntyre, Andrade, Carmelo Hayes, Chad Gable, who again had the most notable moments in that match, Jey Uso and LA Knight that you mentioned. Sami Zayn beats Braun Breaker clean. I would assume we're going to get a rematch at SummerSlam and Braun Breaker wins it. Then you had the third match of the night, Damian Priest and Seth Rollins for the championship. Damian Priest retains, and a lot of fallout from that. We'll get to. Tiffany Stratton then wins the women's Money in the Bank contract in that match, beating Chelsea Green, Io Sky, Lyra, Valkyria, Naomi, and Zoe Stark, and the Bloodline beating the trio of Cody, Kevin Owens, and Randy Orton. So the spot to start is the fallout from Drew McIntyre winning the briefcase. I did not think what they did was what they were going to do. I think that was kicked around by a lot of people, and you mentioned it as well, talking about it on the tech file of Drew's going to win. He said he's going to cash in that night. CM Punk's going to come out and screw him during the cash in. I thought there's no way they're doing this. It's too convoluted. It's the same thing over and over. And how many times is Drew McIntyre going to fall for this? So I assume there was some clever way around it. We didn't get it. To me, that was the biggest disappointment of the night. Is I still really like what they're doing here and building the storyline. And it's very reminiscent of Bret Hart's in 98, 97-ish, when he was the Canadian that was against the Americans that technically was wronged, but we still viewed him as the heel. That is very much Drew McIntyre. But, I kind of mentioned too, how many times can you step on the rake when Drew McIntyre, through his promos and everything else, is a smart guy and, laying out his case that we're with him there. But time after time, when these things happen, Drew, CM Punk's going to do this. And it just happens repeatedly. I didn't think Drew was going to win the title tonight because that's the craziest part of all of this is, I don't know if I would say painted themselves into a corner, but what they did with the King of the Ring, where they said the winner gets a championship match at SummerSlam, and that was Gunther, that really muddied all of this because you wondered how much longer is this reign going to go on for Damian Priest? And I have some thoughts on that. But Seth Rollins comes back, and it's okay. Seth Rollins going to beat him to make Gunther beating Seth Rollins look even more impressive and put him over. Drew McIntyre at Clash in the Castle. Is he going to win here? But then what happens with Gunther? So that was the weird part of all of this. This now makes sense. And I think we all assume Gunther is beating Damian Priest. CM Punk and Drew McIntyre don't need the championship for that feud. It just felt like we're starting to kind of mow over the same piece of grass.
To a degree, so the thing with the Drew McIntyre CM Punk feud that is it's been interesting is because CM Punk's been hurt. So they've been trying to keep a storyline alive with somebody who hasn't been able to really get in the ring. Like, we haven't seen CM Punk wrestle since Royal Rumble at this point. So it's been a very long time where they're kind of letting it simmer. They want it in the background. I do think that having Seth Rollins also kind of catch, astray from CM Punk's interference helps, because if you remember when CM Punk came back, there was all the beef with Seth Rollins and him being so upset about it, so on and so forth. So him having that there too just adds a little bit in there where it's like, don't forget, y'all, Seth Rollins and CM Punk don't like each other either. Like, we know CM Punk's focusing on Drew McIntyre, but just don't forget the fact that Seth Rollins also has a beef with him, and now he has another gripe to add onto his list as to what problems that he has with CM Punk. So you can also build that out going forward. But I think they're just trying to get this match to SummerSlam, where it's like, this is the final straw. We saw Drew McIntyre so upset. He's out here hitting GMs and just losing it at the like post-show conferences and everything like that. So I think for what they had given to him with the injuries around Punk, they have been able to tell the story in a way to kind of keep you invested. Now, I can see where you come from saying, like, we've been here too many times. Like, it's been since WrestleMania at this point with CM Punk coming out, messing him over. But I think that payoff is coming soon.
I to be clear, I'm not sure what CM Punk's status is. I thought he was cleared. I heard maybe he's not cleared physically, and that was also part of kind of dragging this thing on. I would assume we're getting CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre at SummerSlam. And, at one point I did wonder, when I think it was Corey Graves that threw it out there and it reminded you of when Bobby Heenan just innocuously threw out, which side is Hulk Hogan on back at Bash at the Beach, when Corey Graves, as the ladder match was starting, said, I mean, he doesn't have to cash in on Damian Priest. He could choose to cash in on Cody Rhodes. And you wondered, are they going to do that just to like take Drew away from that CM Punk picture? But not the case. I said there's some thoughts on Damian Priest. I was open to him as the champion. I was glad to see, Triple H, I don't want to say get his way, but continue to promote other talent. And we've seen it now Friday with DIY winning the tag team championships. It just hasn't worked for me. And I want it to work. I want to be there with Damian Priest. It feels like a secondary title with Damian Priest holding it. He did not have a good match. It wasn't a good match, period, against Seth Rollins last night. And I mean, there was the weird spot too, where didn't even kick out and the referee had to look like an idiot and just not count to 3. So there's been some of those clunky moments, and Damian Priest, you could see, was very agitated after the match. It sounds like he was upset at himself over that spot and a few other things, but it hasn't really worked for me as much as I wanted it to with Damian Priest carrying the title.
Yeah, even still, like, it's his first major title run as well. So at least once this title run comes to a close, he will have been at least a one-time champion. So there is some cachet to build off of that. And at the very least, the Judgment Day storyline has been interesting with him having the belt, the tension with him and Finn Balor, what Liv Morgan got going on with Dom and her trying to kind of infiltrate the Judgment Day as well. Just in the comments, even the stipulation for this match, where if he would have lost, he would have been out of Judgment Day, and him making the comments like, well, they need me more than I need them. So like, there's also that slow burn in the background of the storyline of just what's going to happen with Judgment Day when it comes to Damian Priest and Finn Balor in particular and their relationship. But I agree. The title run so far has probably been one of the most disappointing since WrestleMania, when all these different belts flipped over. That's probably one of the ones that's definitely up there for just most disappointing. I thought that it could kind of propel him in a certain way, but it just hasn't gotten all the way there. And like you said, he's very hard on himself. Triple H mentioned, like, I wish that I could like take the phone away from him and just have nobody bother him for a little bit while he figures this out and processes it, because I know he's beating himself up about it, but that's the way it goes. Like, you can still have a good storyline come out of this, even if the title reign itself was a little bit lackluster, which in my opinion, I agree with you. It hasn't all the way been there for me either.
And that was the other strange part was, as you mentioned, they've been setting up what appears to be a Damian Priest versus not Drew McIntyre, Damian Priest versus Finn Balor here. And we even got that subtle part of it towards the end of their promo when Damian Priest says, hey guys, stay back there. I want to be here alone. And you had Finn Balor with the whatever you say, boss type of line. And then nothing came of it. So that was the other strange part to me, is you wondered, okay, what's going to happen here? Triple H has done a good job at dragging, not in a bad way, but dragging out stories and really taking your time to tell that. So I'm sure that's all part of it. I still feel like it's Liv Morgan is aligned with Finn Balor, and that's going to be ultimately what we see is he takes over the Judgment Day. She's a part of it. You have Carlito and others, but we didn't get that payoff either. So all in all, for a match, I was very intrigued to see that, okay, here's where the interesting stuff is going to come. You had Seth Rollins making his return. Damian Priest has been pretty good in the ring as well. It was just a total dud for me. And the one part that I did wonder if there was not necessarily a change of course, but when CM Punk had attacked Drew McIntyre, and then that moment where he looked at the title, I wondered, not so much is he going to hit him with the belt. I wondered if he realized, wait a minute, if I help him win this title, I can beat him and take the title. So I wondered if he was going to then turn his attention to Damian Priest and Seth Rollins, but instead he did not. So that's what we were left with. Any final thoughts on that match or that whole title scene that we have?
I just, even before the pin, the kick out that should have been a kick out that wasn't a kick out, I was like, it just felt like sloppy. Like they just didn't seem to have really good chemistry, which surprised me because of the reputation that Seth Rollins has as a worker. But sometimes just the chemistry isn't there between two wrestlers. So it just was sloppy. Like some of the moves didn't hit. It was some botches in there along the way. It just wasn't, like you said, it wasn't a good match to me. Probably the weakest of the night. And initially I wondered if that was going to be the main event, where it's like the title match closes the show, the cash in, if it happens, can happen then, and you go home from there. But I'm glad they didn't go that way. I'm glad that they actually did end with that 6-man tag match with the Bloodline and Cody and Kevin and Randy Orton.
I think the only way, given how that ended, that you could have closed with that as your main event is if we would have seen a Bret Hart-esque freak out by Drew McIntyre again, which we kind of got on the post show and everything that WWE put out there on social. But if you saw Drew McIntyre attacking officials and something else, then you could have closed with that. But otherwise, no, I think they made the right call. Then we had, I believe in between there is where we had our announcement. So I don't know if you saw any of the reports of, hey, there's a WWE superstar that's in town, and it appeared to be John Cena. Trish Stratus was also the semi-host of this show. That was the funny part. Is Trish Stratus, the last time we saw her, was a full-on heel, and now no mention of that, and she's just the babyface in Toronto that's addressing the crowd. But she brings out John Cena, who announces he's retiring with an asterisk, and said he had an announcement, had the towel and t-shirt that basically said, "This is my retirement." So gave it away before he even spoke. Also, the sense of this retirement where we don't really know when or where. It's just, hey, I'm going to be retiring within the next year. Kind of like Bryan Danielson. If this is my last year as a full-time active wrestler. I don't know. I know John Cena is very polarizing. He's never been for me. It's too corny and cheesy. And we just got even more of it with this appearance and announcement.
Yeah. I mean, John Cena mentioned it after WrestleMania this year. He's like, I'm not wrestling past the age of 50, so I know my time's coming to a close. Woo, woo, woo. So I already knew he was planning to have a last run because he mentioned it on the Pat McAfee show. Like, it's coming to a close soon. I haven't figured out the details, but I'm going to have one last run. I'm not going to be wrestling at the age of 50. He's 47 now. So him saying like next year is my last year, I'm done after 2025, makes sense. It falls within that range for him. So it was, like you meant, it was kind of random. So, oh, okay, John Cena coming out. He has a new gear already. Of course, that was available for purchase just about as soon as he hit that ring. So like, I also was not a big Cena person. I also wasn't watching wrestling like when Cena came onto the scene. Like by the time I got back into it, he was already the guy. He already had the CM Punk feuds and everything like that because I started watching again in 2012. So he was established. He was good to go. And I just like, he's for the kids. Like he is going to be who he is, and that's fine. I appreciate him. I do think he's one of the greatest of the business, just him having to carry the company, so on and so forth. So seeing him get his last run is going to be fun, I think. The nostalgia of it and just being able to appreciate somebody who has spent so much time in the business, although he hasn't been there recently, doesn't take away from, you know, what he had built before. So I'm looking forward to the farewell tour for John Cena. I hope it's as good as Sting's was in AEW because they had some moments that came out of that.
I doubt it. Yeah, so that was the caveat with John Cena. He did also participate in the post-show press conference where he spent a lot of time talking about his career and his past, and the moderator even said, okay, that's enough for now, and he stopped them and said, no, I'll take some more questions, which be careful what you ask for, John Cena, because the next question then was about, do you want to address your comments where you praised Vince McMahon after what happened? And I'm not here to talk about the past, when he had just spent the previous 15 minutes talking about the past. So that to me is the John Cena that I've always known and will remember. Then we moved on to the women's match. As we mentioned, Tiffany Stratton wins it. I thought going in, I actually thought Chelsea Green was going to win this match, especially because they made a point to continue to emphasize it's 100% success rate on the female side of women cashing in the briefcase, where you thought, okay, I feel like you're setting me up for this is going to be the time that somebody cashes in and loses. And of that group, Chelsea Green would make the most sense. But Tiffany Stratton wins it. I don't think anybody has an issue with that. She was probably the right person to win. My only pushback on it would be I don't think she needs it. She's already kind of propelled herself into that scene.
Yeah, but it gives her something else to kind of add a little razzle dazzle onto it as well. I don't think that she's going to have a very long reign with the briefcase, where some people, it takes them a while to kind of build themselves up to go for it. But Tiffany could be somebody who, as quickly as SummerSlam, is like, I'm about to cash in.
Yeah.
Because, like you mentioned, she has the cachet behind her already. I too thought it was going to be Chelsea Green winning it, and when she was right there, that last spot to end the match where she gets pushed off the ladder into the two tables, I was just like, not like, my mouth actually dropped open. Like, I was just like, no, like what? So, I mean, the women's Money in the Bank match, I think, was probably my favorite match of just the evening itself. The spots were awesome. Like, the storytelling was good. Even Naomi, when she had the two ladders doing like the splits, and then she came out of it, and I was like, this is just amazing spots throughout this match.
Spots were awesome. You could tell Michael Cole and Corey Graves were thoroughly enjoying it too. I think Michael Cole at one point even said, I feel sick for how much I actually enjoy this. It started off pretty rough too, where you wondered like, oh, have they bitten off a little more than they can chew with some of them in this match? But then it picked up. And even some of the psychology of how they've told the story of Chelsea Green is afraid of heights, and the way that Tiffany Stratton got the briefcase, where she just shook the ladder to startle her and then pushed her off. To me, I thought was really, really well done in terms of the storytelling perspective there. So yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going to be long that she holds on to it. I don't know if you'd do SummerSlam, since that's what Io Sky did last year, but I think it's going to be relatively quick. And she hinted too that she wants a match with Trish Stratus. So I wonder if we see that here at one of the next big PLEs, and maybe we get a cash in at Survivor Series, or Bad Blood, which is returning, which gave us the debut of Kane. So that's certainly the biggest piece to come out of the women's match. And then we got to the final match of the night, the Bloodline versus that trio of Cody, Randy Orton, and Kevin Owens. Kind of similar to the men's title match, where you wondered, what direction are they going to go here? Because I think a lot of people had been wondering, is Randy Orton going to turn on Cody, and are we going to set up a Randy versus Cody match here? Didn't make that much sense to me, given they've they've pulled Cody into this Bloodline universe and story mode here. So I always kind of assumed the Bloodline are going to win this match, and it has to be Solo Sikoa pinning Cody to set up what we perceive to be a SummerSlam match. It's exactly what we got. And again, this is the first time we saw him in a match in WWE. But man, anybody that watched Jacob Fatu in MLW told you he's got something here. And this guy seems like he's going to be perfect for the WWE. He was the star of that match.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He was the star in that one. And I mean, I was looking forward to his debut because I had heard so much about him. And I mean, even just the way he came on the scene, he just felt different than the previous additions to the Bloodline. We're like, okay, this is different here. So the match itself, watching him, okay, I love how Solo was really leaning into like, I'm the head of the table. I'm the tribal chief. It's the way I want to do it, or ain't no way at all. Like, even just starting the match off where he's like, everybody wants me to start against Cody. Y'all know I want Cody. Y'all know I want this belt. He's in the ring. He tags out right away. Like, forget it. Like, nah, not at this moment. You don't get it. I just love those little moments of pro wrestling where it's like, yes, feed into the crowd, like engage with the crowd, make people hate you even more. Those little things when heels do it, because now at this age as a wrestling fan, an adult wrestling fan, where it's like, I appreciate the business of wrestling. So like, just be good at your job. And when you're good at your job, you're going to get me on board. And that's how this match felt to me. I was also thinking that Randy might turn, but I like that he didn't. It was just a straight match this way. The ref caught some heat there. I thought like the first one, like the spike, all right, he's done. Then he gets smashed in between some the stairs too. And I was like, this is tough sledding for this guy right here. But
right before that too, you had the awkward spot where he had taken the first bump. And then I think it was Jacob Fatu that was going up to the top rope, and the ref had to awkwardly, I should probably get out of the ring. So I'm still going to pretend to be knocked out, but like slowly drag myself out of the ring and fall to the floor. You have the basically Ultimate Warrior spot too with Jacob Fatu, where Randy Orton gave him that vintage Orton DDT through the ropes and immediately pops up right behind him.
So it's all, so when you start doing that type of stuff, the Ultimate Warrior, no selling, hulking up, all that type of stuff, like
only one way to go. Yeah, you're painting yourself into a corner.
You are. It gets hard to sketch, like to really plan around that eventually. Because if people expect you to not get hurt by anything, that was like with Kane too. When Kane came on the scene initially back in, where it's like, how do you hurt this dude? Like,
well, I mean, it's what they're dealing with now. When you look at, assuming they handle it differently, but the last version of Bray Wyatt that we had, that was the biggest issue with it. Is okay, if this guy can't be hurt by anything, what's the point of any of this?
Exactly. And that's always difficult. So like when I saw him do that, I was like, okay, I don't know if I like this, but like I get it. It's just always hard to book after that. If you see somebody in that type of mode, which is going back, part of why I was shocked to see Braun Breaker lose clean, where the way he's been built has just been like this unstoppable force. So to see a 1-2-3 with no one interfering, it's just Sammy, was a shock. But for the 6-man tag, I love that Solo's the one who got that win at the end. We haven't seen Cody take a pin, I mean, since he's been champion. So I thought going into it, like, I mean, you can protect Cody, you can, do something with Randy and Kevin and start kind of laying those seeds of the Randy wanting Cody's belt. They didn't do that. They just clean out said, Solo, you pin him, because the Bloodline needed this too. That's why I thought the Bloodline would win, where I'm like, you have to give them a win. It's the first time this iteration is coming out. You have to establish them as a really strong heel, especially for when Roman comes back.
So you bring that up, some final thoughts on that. I saw people questioning too, like, so Roman shows up tonight to help Paul Heyman, right? Look, take the big piece outside of the wrestling story out of it. I didn't think tonight would be the night that he showed up anyway, because it's too soon. And even then, we were told and led to believe it's going to be a lengthy layoff for Roman Reigns after WrestleMania. It's been, 3 months that he's been away. So, no, it seems like some more time. Also, I believe yesterday, it was either yesterday or Friday, was his dad's funeral. So there was no chance there, because I think even Michael Cole made a mention to Jey Uso was there, despite the fact that it was his uncle's funeral, because, his uncle would have wanted him to do this for how important that it was to him. I still don't think we see Roman back before SummerSlam. I think as earliest return date for him would be you have Solo versus Cody at SummerSlam, and maybe Roman shows up then after the match. But I still think we're looking at this going to stretch into the early fall before Roman Reigns returns. And I think that's perfectly fine. That you hear the crowd, even last night, how much they're chanting for Roman Reigns.
I think Bad Blood is a perfect event to have that Bloodline Civil War at some point take place. Like, that's around the time I'm expecting Roman back, so that there could be a match, because it feels like it's a miss if you have a Bad Blood PLE and the Bloodline is not part of Bad Blood. Like, it's right there. It's right there for him. But one other thought that I did have going into the match and just coming out the event, because it's 4 members in the Bloodline now. So I was really curious, like, which 3 are going to wrestle, so on and so forth. And Tonga Loa, I was like, I wonder if he's just going to become the new wise man now that they outed Paul Heyman, and just let him kind of have that role, and then let Tama, Solo, and Jacob Fatu just kind of be the 3 that are actually in ring wrestling.
And especially, I mean, I wasn't a heavy New Japan consumer. I'd seen some of it through back in the glory days when you had AJ Styles there and Kenny Omega. I would see some of it. But everything you heard when Tonga Loa came over it was kind of a surprise of, we knew Tama Tonga was coming, but Tonga Loa, the biggest surprise is just that his knees are kind of shot and he doesn't really have much left. So that's a good point. I do wonder if maybe he just transitions into that role. Also, Hikuleo, who is also technically part of that Bloodline, his deal just ran up with New Japan in June, and the prevailing theory is he's joining WWE. If he does, I would assume he's going to be attached to this story. So does he join the Bloodline new version of it as well? I've had this assumption the whole time. My theory is still, I think we all assume that The Rock is the puppet master pulling the strings with all of this. He's the guy behind it. But I think the new group turns on Solo after he does not win the title or something to set up Solo being reunited with his brothers and with Roman Reigns. against The Rock and that portion of the bloodline.
See, I think Solo's going to have to go to battle against Roman. I think I call this like bloodline wolf pack right now, where it's like, this is the other version of it right now. But the OG, the black and the white, the Roman, the Jay, the Jimmy, the Paul Heyman version of the bloodline. Like, I feel like that's the one where it's like these four, well, maybe not four. We haven't seen Jimmy since he was outed as well too. So I feel like whenever Roman comes back, Jimmy will be very close behind him, and whenever he comes back, Paul Heyman should follow there shortly thereafter. So maybe somebody in this current Wolfpack version goes back over to the other side. I don't see Jey Uso getting involved at this point, unless it gets to a level where it's like, okay, now y'all have like my brother's back in it. Well, my other brother, Jimmy, Solo's lost his mind at this point. Can't talk to that brother. And I have to kind of just step back in here for a minute to kind of clean this up before I get back to my dreams of chasing this world championship over here.
We didn't see Logan Paul show up and interfere with LA Knight. We did not, thankfully, see the Wyatt Six show up and do anything with Chad Gable. That was one of the stranger parts to all of this for me, is they did a very good job of building Chad Gable as a heel and starting that split between he and Alpha Academy. But, you know, whenever you get non-American crowds and you get those smart crowds, it's hard not to get fully behind Chad Gable when you see everything that he can do in the ring. And he was super over. He was not a heel at all in that ladder match.
That's how it goes sometimes when you're just good at your job. Like I mentioned, like the charisma, the in-ring talent, the storylines have been interesting with them as well, where it's like, I'm just kind of behind him right now. This man magically, he even talked about, I had a hole in my head and I'm here. Like, he's entertaining. It reminds me a bit, not to the same level of it, because this is my favorite wrestler, Kurt Angle. When Kurt Angle debuted, he was one of those guys where you're like, you corny. Like, I don't like this. I don't like you, but you're so good at it. I can't help but to like you. Like, I instantly liked Kurt Angle when I saw him. And I was just like, from here on out, I'm a Kurt Angle fan. I'm going for it. And Chad Gable has some of that in him, where it's like that awkward charisma, where it's like, you're just such a goody. That's what it is. And I think that's part of like the appeal of him. And he can go in the ring, which when you can go, smart wrestling fans always appreciate that.
Another PLE that was short and sweet. That's kind of been the Triple H model, that this was, 5 matches they've kind of stuck to. We're doing 5 to 6 match shows. We're going to take our time with the matches, and we're not going to drag on. He even made a comment on the, I don't know if you saw it, on the press conference, where he had made some passing comments about how, I mean, I've been in those, like, we're not looking to do 7-hour shows where the crowd is just dead and waiting for this thing to end. And I think a few people in the audience kind of smirked, and he had to quickly say, don't read too much into that. Essentially, I'm not talking about AEW. I was a part of shows that we did that were 5, 6 or more hours, where you would come out and you could see the crowd just waiting for this thing to end. So we've gotten the exact opposite approach here, where it's routinely been 2.5 to 3 hours, which is perfect, I think, for most wrestling fans, rather than being sucked in for your whole day in 5 hours or more. I don't know if that's going to be the case with SummerSlam, but we'll see. But certainly a lot that's been set up for SummerSlam coming out of this. I would assume that's where we finally get probably some type of unsanctioned match in a street fight between Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. I think we're getting Cody Rhodes versus Solo Sikoa. We know we have Bayley versus Nia Jax, I believe. I would assume there's going to be some type of tag title. And Braun Breaker and Sami Zayn. I'm guessing we're getting a rematch there as well.
So all of the things that you just said is exactly why I was like, I can see why SummerSlam is now going to be 2 days going forward. Because when you mentioned the 7-8 hour cards, like those old WrestleManias where you'd be sitting there like, this started at 4. It is 11 o'clock. I have to go to work tomorrow. I can't do this right now. I do like that split, because if Triple H is looking to have these smaller cards, which, as you mentioned, is great for fans, but I also think it's good for the wrestlers, where you have time to really tell your story in your match. You don't have to rush through it. You don't have to worry about getting cut for time. It is
you're on the sacrificial lamb spot too, where you know, like, they don't care. They're waiting for the match that's 2 down the card. They're going to the bathroom. They're going to the concessions. They just want it to be over.
It makes sense. Like, I like the way of the flow of these cards now, and I'm looking forward to SummerSlam. Again, I can see why it's moving to 2 days, because you already mentioned like 6 matches that can be on the card. So we'll see how this actually shakes out.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention Gunther versus Damian Priest. So there's quite a bit there. And I would assume Royal Rumble is not far behind from 2 days, that you'll get like the men's match one day, the women's match the next day, and you'll split up the titles and everything else. That'll do it for this one. I think we touched all the bases on Money in the Bank. We're probably going to do the same for SummerSlam. We're going to add the disclaimer once more. It's not taken away from the Bucks content. This is just a free additional show for anybody that is interested in pro wrestling. We're still going to have Monday through Friday Bucks show. We're going to have some more Bucks shows out there starting tomorrow, as now we shift our attention towards Summer League. But that's why some of the imaging and everything else a little different for this one. So for those of you that joined us, we thank you for that. Hopefully you appreciated it. Camille and I will be back once again tomorrow with a Bucks specific show. We will talk to you once again then on Locked on Bucks.